Alan Nicol, great to see you.
Thank you very much for
Again?
Yeah, a long Simon, yes.
Not at all. Enjoyed the launch the other night.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? Yeah.
Any feedback from it?
It's all been positive. A lot of people have. They were impressed with the venue for a start.
Yes, it was really nice. Central Hotel in Glasgow.
That was through my daughter.
They had a lovely layout, didn't they, with the tables? They even had wee notepads and pencils.
Yes, which was great. I'm sure they lost.
If you said anything interesting, folk would have taken notes.
That's true, but I didn't.
Yeah, it was very good. And that was for your daughter. Did she work in there or got
She did work with the Grand Central. She works with De Vere now, and she spends most of her working time down in London. But
okay.
She was the one who refurbished the Grand Central. And it was a roaring success. It really was.
She's made a great job of it because it's retained all the old character of the house.
Well, it was interesting. Every time she gave me a call, would say, "Just lifted a carpet and discovered this wonderful marble." You know, and I mean, the place was it had fallen into real rack and ruin at one point.
Yep.
Homeless people, etc. So it was great to see it back.
I think I was partly responsible for that rack and ruin as well, because the police used to have nights out in there every Christmas. That was a kind of standard thing. You got a table, and they were a rowdy bunch.
Oh, they were. Oh, yes. So I know that because I had several police friends who invited me on a fishing trip once, and it was wild.
Did you do any fishing?
No, it was clinking. Noises.
Every police trip was the same. It didn't matter what you were invited on. I remember getting invited. No, they just put my name up on the board for bowling. This was in Rossi. I was the CID in Rossi, and I saw the board and I said, "Why is my name there? I don't play bowls. I've never played bowls in my life. I was 25 or something." Never mind, you're coming along and that's the end of it. I don't know if I played bowls or not that day. There was whiskey at either end of the rink. Is that what you call it? The rink?
Yeah.
I don't even know if the Whitehall moved about.
I played bowls myself, but
what? It was my name was first on the board every year for that particular outing.
So it had nothing to do with bowling, I presume.
Nothing.
Same as the fishing trip, it had everything to do with drinking. And the guy who ran the boat had an attractive young daughter, and she ended up just locking herself in the toilet the whole time. So it was wild, absolutely wild.
I remember, no, I don't. This is a story I was told, so it might not be true. Most of them aren't. But it was a police fishing trip to Arica, and the boys are out in the boat, and they've had a few tins. The tins on the way up, that was the first thing you heard on the minibus, was up the back. So they're all steaming, they're out in the boat doing a bit of fishing, and one of them says, "I've lost my teeth." His teeth fell out into the loch. Now, this is one of the deepest lochs in Scotland. That's where the submarines used to go up and down. So he's distraught that he's lost his teeth in the water. And one of the other boys says, "Hang on, I've got a spinner. I'll spin and we'll see if we can catch your teeth."
Right, okay.
So this seemed to make sense to the other 3 or 4 of them on the boat. So they all put spinners on and started trawling for the teeth. And one of them has the bright idea, takes his teeth out, puts them on his line, throws it in and says, I've got something here,
right.
And reels in the set of false teeth. So the guy who's lost them says, "Young beauty," and he gets his teeth. "Oh, they're not mine." And throws them back in the water.
Certainly.
Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But I can't see him making that up, really.
No, but when drink's taken,
It sounds kind of par for the course.
Well, it does, because when that fishing trip I went on, they were throwing people in. And they were just chucking people off the boat. And
was there a few lawyers? Was it all lawyers that were
No, it was all police officers. It was really whole CID, basically.
Oh, well,
and they started throwing in their colleagues. And they came up to me and said, "Oh, I can't swim." And they accepted that.
Right.
So they threw in one of their guys who was lying back. And he had this fantastic big watch which wasn't waterproof. And he ended up in the water. And this was from Largs. And he said, "Oh, listen, my wife will kill me. This watch isn't waterproof." And it was a present she gave me when we got married. And he told this big story as he had his hand out the water and he took the watch off and threw it so we could catch it. Of course, it went right over the board and down the other side. And nobody told him till I get back.
Somebody should have been there with a fishing reel, there's
Aye, right
trawl
enough,
for it, a spinner.
Well, they weren't fishing really. Nobody was fishing at all, as far as I could see.
I wonder if these things still occur.
I wouldn't think so. I think
What were you doing at that time, Alan, then? Were you working in an office in Really Hill?
No, I was a law student at that time.
Right.
There's a friend of mine called Ian Curry.
So why were you on the police? Were you bait or something then?
Well, I felt like it when once the boat took off, but no, I knew some of the guys that were there, and
What was the name you mentioned there?
Ian Curry. He was a detective sergeant when he left the police. He did a law degree, and he became a fiscal in Glasgow.
It's not the Ian Curry that I'm thinking of then. 'Cause that's good. That's good.
Well, Ian came from Isla.
Right.
And
Oh, I knew Ian Curry. That Ian Curry as well. Yes, it's a different Ian Curry than the one underwater unit Ian Curry I was thinking of.
Right. Well, no, Ian was a good friend of mine in the fiscal service.
Right.
And some of his stories were just hair-raising about some of the things that the police used to do years gone by, you know.
Especially when you mention Ireland, and then you're in a different world of censorship altogether.
Yeah, I think so.
So, let's go back then to you were a law student. Where were you brought up on?
I was brought up in Glasgow. My parents finally settled in Glasgow because after the war, my father came from Paisley, my mother came from Elgin, and they met at Fort George during World War II. And she wanted to stay up in the northeast, and Dad was just chasing work basically.
What did he do?
He was a heating engineer,
right?
And he had joined in September 1939. He signed up, and of course he hadn't finished his apprenticeship.
Right.
So he really hated the fact that he had to finish his apprenticeship when he came back after being wounded in Normandy and all sorts of stuff. And he chased work all over the place. So my sister was born in Elgin, my oldest sister.
Right.
I was born
Who did your reading at the launch?
She did.
It was really good.
Yeah, she was a
brilliant.
teacher.
Right.
She was a retired teacher.
That's why the room was quiet then.
Yes, she knows how to handle kiddies basically. And my other two sisters were born down in the Central Belt. So at the end of the day, my dad travelled all over the place to look for work.
Yeah. So
I was brought up in Glasgow, but I was born in Buckie.
Right. What school did you go to?
Highland School.
I was a Highland pupil as well.
Yes. A Highland.
Aye.
Right.
See that big board as you go in? It's got all the duxes on the right hand side. I was never.
You were never on it.
No, never even near that.
No, same as me.
So, what year would you leave school then? Did you leave Highland?
I started in 63, I think it must have been, and finished 67. So no, 68, 69, I think.
Well, I was away. I came 71. I was 12 in 1971.
Right.
I remember it because Thistle won the League Cup.
Oh, that's correct, yes.
51 years ago.
I remember that game.
And the Misuse of Drugs Act as well.
Yes,
all these triggers. It was a big year.
There was even a connection between the two.
So, Highland boys.
Yes.
There you are. Senior secondary it was.
It was actually a good school.
It was still a senior secondary when I qualified. Quali.
Yeah.
And the first year was Highland Senior School, and all my mates were down in Woodside or something. They all got sent off. All the good football players. But it went comprehensive at the end of my first year. And they all came back again. It all changed.
Yeah,
it wasn't a senior school, it was a comprehensive then. Highland comprehensive.
Because in my time it was Hamilton Crescent was the sort of
junior
school.
It was Hamilton Crescent, that's right.
Yeah.
Where all the ruffians went.
Oh yes,
all my mates. So what university?
I went to Dundee and did history.
Right.
And then when I'd finished history, I did a law at Strathclyde.
Right. 2 degrees then?
Yeah, so history was really...
You just like being a student?
It was great, it was a good life. No, that was 6 years I was a student.
Yeah.
And the only thing was I hadn't really thought it through, so that all you could really do is be an archivist, and it's very difficult to get a job.
Yes.
Or a teacher.
Teacher of history.
To be honest, I wasn't really that bothered about that. So I just...
There's an obvious interest there, though, Alan, that your books are basically historical books.
Well, yeah, but it's a combination of the two, really, I suppose. And then eventually, when I did think about it, I thought being a lawyer's probably, a better career.
More pragmatic to
Yes.
see if I get a job.
Well, that's true. And
was there any history of solicitors or anything like that in the family?
No, but my younger sister, who's sadly not with us anymore, she was a solicitor for many years, and she did an arts degree first.
What's her name?
Shona Lamont.
Shona.
Yeah. So she went down the same sort of route, but she was not like A classes all the way through school, and
right.
I wasn't. I was in the C classes.
Okay.
So
you were a late bloomer.
Yes, I suppose that's quite appropriate.
Or did you cheat?
Yeah, well, a combination, I suppose.
Yeah. There was a policeman who stole the police papers, the papers for the examinations. He stole them out of Oxford Street, I think. I'm saying stole. He got the opportunity to procure them and took it and sold them. I think. I might be wrong here, but I'll soon get corrected by some of my colleagues. But he certainly distributed them amongst his colleagues. Whether it was for gain or not, I do not know. But his name was, I can't remember his first name, Miles was his surname. So from then on, for generations thereafter, if you spoke to someone, they would say, you passed your exams, big man? Aye, did you pass by Miles?
Yes.
Aye, you heard that one before?
No, but I can see that.
So a lot of people pass by Miles, a lot of people who went on to very successful careers in the police that would never have passed an exam in their lives. But there you go. Changed days, thankfully. So, who was the first firm you worked for then when you came out of university, Alan, as a solicitor?
My father ran the petrol station at Maryhill Road, opposite the big chapel that's there. And the closest...
It's still there? The garage still there?
It's now it sells tyres and it's got a sort of foreign crew who wash your car.
Okay.
It's a sort of car wash thing now. But one of the customers there was Ian McCarry. And when I was doing my law degree, I didn't get a grant for that. So I ended up selling paraffin around Maryhill.
Right.
And I was in one Friday and my dad said to me, this guy's a solicitor. And I got talking and Ian eventually offered me a job.
Right.
The only drawback to the whole thing was, I suppose, that I was recognised as a paraffin man when I started doing
you probably stank of it for years there.
No, it was good money, I tell you, it was great money. But one of the women who was getting a divorce she sort of broken down in tears, etc. And then she suddenly said to me, I know you from somewhere. You're the paraffin man. I just denied it, of course.
Of course, the best tradition.
She'd have to. She couldn't trust me if I was a paraffin man instead of an apprentice solicitor. Yes.
So how long were you with McGarry and Company?
I worked with Ian just for a year, and then I went to Bovey and Myers Road to get other experience. And then I joined the fiscal service after I qualified.
Right.
And I went to...
How did that come out? That's quite an unusual move, is it not? Or is it?
Not really, because I really wanted the experience, because every time you met somebody who was in the fiscal service, they had done like 10 times more trials than anybody else.
Yeah.
Because they were prosecuting the cases.
Thrown in at the deep end.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And in Glasgow in particular. But I started off down in Greenock, then I got moved to Paisley, and then I went to Glasgow. And I was 12 years in the fiscal service.
As fiscal service.
Yes. And then I left to go to the bar in 1992, and I was there right through till 2019.
This is on the other side of the fence then, at the bar?
Yes, apart from the last 8 years where I was back prosecuting as an advocate deputy.
Okay. Can you explain what at the bar means then for people?
Right. What you do is you have to sit exams at the bar. You have to have certain exams before you even apply to the bar.
Okay.
And once you're there, you do a period of divilling, it's called, and you get a year without any pay whatsoever.
Yeah.
So you really got...
Is that still the same now?
It's still the same now, yeah. And there's still a record amount of people going to the bar. I think it was about 20 odds just called there
Right.
in June. So it still seems to have its appeal for lots of people. I don't know whether it's just the wig thing or whatever, but I think you feel as if you've earned it when you, after a year of no pay and really hard study, and of course you're divilling to a devil master who's civil or criminal. At the end of the day, I ended up just going to what I knew, which was criminal work.
Yes.
And that's what I ended up doing just about the whole time.
And enjoyed the criminal work. Enjoyed the criminal side of it.
Yeah, I think.
Judging by the books.
Well, you know, when you start a trial, you've got no idea what's going to happen. I mean, anything can happen. One of the last trials I did there, the jury box collapsed. And, you know, it's just completely unexpected.
In the middle of the trial?
In the middle of the trial, I was actually asking a crowd witness evidence. There was this really loud creaking noise. I looked up at the judge and he was going, what was that noise? And then the next thing, the back row just disappeared. Wow. All these people crashed to the ground.
And they hurt?
And surprisingly, I was expecting some people to say that they had some sort of injury because it looked as if they would. But no, they were all back the next day without any.
They moved court, I take it.
Well, we moved court and they fixed it back up, and I thought I wouldn't really trust that back seat, But they carried on with it because justice must go on.
When you said anything can happen in the trial, I was thinking more of evidence that might come out, or twists and turns, witnesses that don't turn up or do turn up out of the blue, or surprises that the other side bring out.
That's continual. That's all to do with the prosecution. When you're defending, you can sit back and just say, well, it's nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
And when you're actually prosecuting, it's everything to do with you if people don't turn up.
Yes.
So you get warrants, preemptive warrants sometimes. No doubt you'll have heard of that and you'll know about these things. But you can usually count on the cops turning up okay.
Yeah.
But there's no guarantee these days. There's no guarantee.
COVID's become an excuse for everything, hasn't it?
I think it has.
Really?
Actually, yes.
And there's such a backlog just now in the system. You'd be glad you're not there just now.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It was a pressure job in the first place, and now
it really is a pressure job because you don't get any slack from the bench. It doesn't matter how well you get on with people on the bench. They don't cut you slack if you're prosecuting because they expect things to go really, really well. And if they don't, then it's really your problem. It's your problem.
Sort it out.
Yeah.
I used to feel sorry for them when I came in, and you'd see the fiscal sitting with it, and that's nothing. It's that size a pile of papers, and that's today's cases. The docket, some would call it, for the day, and it's just a matter of process, getting them through as quickly as you can. Having to deal with all each defence lawyer's maybe only got to deal with one or two clients that
that's
day.
The difference. That's the thing.
And they're quite, and maybe they've offloaded it to someone else to deal with that day while they're away at another court.
Of course,
but the fiscal's got to deal with all of that.
That's right. They've got the whole thing to deal with. Yeah.
I don't know why I'm sympathetic with fiscals. God, the pain of my life. Try to get past them to get to court in the first place.
Yeah.
We could go on all day about that side of life. So your career then was pretty much split between the prosecution side and the defence side now?
I worked out just a couple of months ago there. I think I had prosecuted for a total of 20 years. That was 12 as a fiscal and 8 as an advocate deputy.
Yep.
Whereas I defended for 18.
Right. So pretty even split.
It was pretty close somehow. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad.
And as an advocate for the Crown, you're prosecuting the most serious cases in Scotland.
Yeah. You're in the High Court as an advocate deputy.
Yes.
It's rape, murder, etc.
Yep, it's the highest crimes in Scotland. And I can give you a wee insight from the witness box. Have you ever been a witness in a case? Huh?
I have actually, yes. I was a witness to a break-in.
What was that? A break-in?
It was a break-in. And we had caught somebody who was breaking the front door when I stayed temporarily with my sister.
Right.
And my partner at the time was a fiscal.
Right.
And she and I came down, and there was a thumping at the front door. I saw a hand coming through the letterbox, trying to get to the
The
snip.
latch, yeah.
And I just opened the door and grabbed this kid who had a stookie on, and he was kicking the door.
Right.
So he was really trying hard. And I just grabbed him. He was about 16 maybe.
Okay.
And my partner went to get my brother-in-law, and we just held on to him. Then another kid started shouting at me and saying, let him go, I know where you stay, all this sort of stuff. I just held on to him. Of course, the bullets took a long time to come, as usual. But when they did, they got him, and they got the brother who hadn't left either. So
Right.
it was quite clear they were just, they were working as a team. There was an AJ, and there was the boy trying to break the door down. And then when it went to trial, the fiscal didn't fight it.
Right. So you never gave evidence?
I did.
You did?
I did. I gave evidence, and there was a defence motion that there was no case to answer in respect that we had seen different things, all pointed in the same direction.
Yes.
And
I always found that if two witnesses saw the same thing, it was a bit suspicious.
highly suspicious. And of course,
It's not like cops ever see the same thing.
That's exactly right. Whereas we had actually, she had seen
Dealt with it.
she'd seen the letterbox opening, and she'd heard the thumping, and I had seen the letterbox with an arm through it.
Yes.
And the fiscal decided that she wasn't going to argue it. She just said, I'm not. And I later found out that she wasn't really a friend of my my partner at the time.
Right. So there's always a background.
There was a background.
History
There was a
there.
definite background.
So they got no pro, did they?
Oh
They
yeah,
thrown
it was chucked out. Yes, which was ridiculous. It was quite clear they were trying to break in.
Yeah. I'm quite glad that you suffered that. Because it happens to us all the time.
Yeah, of course. I just got to that attitude.
The problem with us, though, is we never get to know the reason.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's a connection between your ex and the fiscal that was dealing with the case. There must be loads of these wee things going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But as cops, you never get to know that. Your case is thrown out for some stupidity. I remember one in Rossi that I lost with Caroline McNaughton was the fiscal.
Caroline, yeah.
And it was basically because Caroline lost the plot. She just got too excited about the whole thing and threw the towel in. But it was so frustrating when you put a lot of work into a case. It was a big fraud case in Rossi.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that you went through that. The reason I asked was because I did some work with a solicitor. I did my degree when I left the police and did a bit of work. And I was in the High Court, as a second, sitting at the table. But I didn't do anything. Took some notes. And there was a cop in the box. And I remember being in his position and seeing you guys scribbling notes and conferring with each other. And it's a real bottle crasher when you're giving your evidence in the High Court in front of a jury. You're giving your evidence. I used to give it to his lordship, of course. But you see these guys giving it. And you think, what have they got? What have they got? And so by the time it comes to cross, your bottle's crashed completely. But here I'm sitting at the big table with the
same thing.
Yes. And I scribbled a note to him to start with. And it said, I think these guys did it. There was two of them charged with rape, I think. Or I think their guy did this. I scribbled a note back, passed it back, and it said, who gives a shit? And that was an eye-opener for me. I realised we're only here to go through the motions of the case and present the thing and argue the thing. But at the end of the day, the court will make its mind up, and that's the end of it. And then he scribbled me another note that said, what are you doing? Are you going to the game tomorrow? Or something along those lines. And I'm thinking of the poor detective that's given his evidence, thinking these guys are serious now. There are lots of notes going on here.
Well, as you say, more often than not, it's you're going for a beer afterwards or whatever,
all the mind games. If only I'd known that 40
years
years ago, it would have saved me so much. Having Carls on standby waiting to take me away to do a runner. Notebooks thrown in the Clyde and all that kind of stuff. They saved me all that. So all that experience then, and all those stories, all the characters, some of the characters, I mentioned Caroline McNaughton, Irvin Smith was the sheriff in Rossi when I worked over there. All of that experience, and when did the writing overlap with your career, or was that after your career?
No, what happened was I wrote manual in 2008.
This is Peter Manuel.
Peter Manuel.
Yep.
And I wrote that after I had been in a second-hand bookshop, and this was 2004. I was getting my sister a present of a book about the Jacobite Rebellion.
Okay.
She's got a great interest in that. And I went to...
And you've got a history degree, of course.
Yeah, well, you know, I was interested in it as well, but not as deeply as she was. And I bought a book about Bonnie Prince Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
On the way out, I saw a book about the trial of Peter Manuel that had a dust jacket on it. And I picked it up, and I looked at it and I thought, that could be quite an interesting book.
Mm-hmm.
And I put the Jacobite book on top of the Peter Manuel book, and the women behind the counter, you know, looked at it. It was a second-hand bookshop, so they weren't expensive. And she picked the first one up, and the second that she did that, she saw the face of Peter Manuel, and she had to sit down.
Yeah.
And that was in 2004. And so her memory was obviously back to 1958.
45.
She came from Bells Hill, and she said to me, you know, even seeing that face now, it haunts me.
Wow.
And I thought about it, and I thought, you know, I wonder if it's worth looking into this.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the Mitchell. I actually went.
You'd never written a book at this point?
No. I went to the Mitchell, and then I went to the National Records, or just called the National Archives at the time. And I got the papers out, and I started going into it. And as soon as you do that,
the actual court papers from the day,
from the day, including the ribbon over the indictment. And as soon as I undid that, there was a clear mark on the papers. So that was it. From when the clerk of justiciary had tied up the papers at the end of Peter Manuel's trial.
And as a historian, that's you who
that's brilliant. That's pure gold.
Any more authentic than that.
I ended up writing it for about 4 years in between cases because I was defending at the time.
What do those court papers tell you? Is that the record of the case? Is that a stereographer, if you like?
It tells you the procedural history of the case. It tells you what happens on a daily basis.
Who writes it? Is it somebody impartial?
It's the clerk who keeps a note of it.
Okay.
And of course there are little notes from the judge.
Yes.
His view of things, which are really interesting. And then it depends what papers you get, but you're able to get the evidence most of the time as well.
Right.
And
the physical evidence.
It's all written down. It's a shorthand writer who takes that.
Okay.
And you know, when you go through all that, you don't. In a case like Peter Manuel, you don't have to, because the papers covered it in real.
The newspapers.
Yes.
Right.
They covered
real
it
detail.
in huge detail.
Yeah.
Particularly some of them who were there every day.
Yes.
It was the first time they had a trial that had been so well reported on, and I think it was Bill Knox from STV who stood outside every day with a microphone and gave a resume of what had happened that day.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I wrote it down for about 4 years, and then I phoned Donald Finlay, and I said to him, Donald, I've just written something, I've got no idea what to do with it. And he said to me...
so what did it look like at that point, Alan? Was it just a factual history of the trial?
Well, not really, because I'd started it off as a serious effort to write a book.
Okay.
And he said to me, just paraphrasing, basically, you've stolen my idea.
So you knew it was a good idea, right?
I said, oh, too bad, I've done it. And Donald then did the foreword. And
grudgingly.
Well, actually, he was great to work with, because I worked with him when I was actually at the bar. I juniored to him quite a lot in murder cases, and I got to know him really well.
Yeah.
And he, as it turned out, had a meeting with a publisher in order to sing the praises of a particular book. And he said, well, I'm meeting this chap tonight, so pass on your manuscript to me. And then a week later, the guy phoned me up and said, if you're in Edinburgh anytime, pop in. And then when I told him that it was the 50th anniversary of Manuel's Yeah,
2009 when he was hung.
2008. He was hanged in July 2008. Sorry,
58.
58.
Yeah.
And he said to me, well, I better get this going then because we've only got a limited time to get it printed.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. It was great. It worked out really well. Then I did The Monster Butler after that.
Okay.
For black and white as well.
Where did the inspiration for that come from?
I suppose it was one thing led to another because once black and white were happy with the manual story,
you're looking for something then?
He actually said to me, you know, anything else if we run out of serial killers? No, certainly not in Scotland. No, not at all. And he just seemed to be quite a sort of natural follow-up because he was 1978.
Okay, 20 years on.
Yeah, it was 20 years on. And of course, Sheila Garvey's 1968.
Yeah.
So it's fallen into place. But the sort of the Monster Butler was slightly different because the guy who was running Black and White had said to me,
Black and White's the publishers in Edinburgh. Still there?
Yeah, they're still there. They're not doing as much, I don't think, because he'd said to me, listen, there's two ways of approaching this because this guy is a dreamer. Archibald Hall had a fantasy life that he wanted to live, and he was extremely dangerous. He was a very dangerous psychopath who murdered 5 people at the end of the day. And he said to me, you should approach it this way. You should write the story on the basis that here's what he did and here's what he thought he had done, sort of thing.
The two people, the Jekyll and Hyde.
It's a sort of Walter Mitty character this guy had. So he always wrote stuff. He wrote a book himself, which is bizarre. And he was actually paid for writing this book, having been convicted of 5 murders.
He wrote it in prison, did he?
He did, yes. I've actually got it at home, and it's actually signed by him. And you wonder, you know, I complain certainly in the Sheila Garvey case about checkbook journalism, but this is it taking it too far.
Yeah,
when you know they're paying somebody who's a murderer to write his story and make himself grand in the process. Yeah, you know, it's a bit like Howard Wilson, and he, you know, he wrote a book and it won some award. You know, you just think there's something tasteless about that.
Totally. I've got an old-fashioned view of that as well. I had an old inspector, Tam Duff, his name was, at Oxford Street when I joined the police. And he was so old school, you know, he had the slashed peak and all that, and he would scream in your face. But he told me that we never call Neds by nicknames.
Right.
We always give them their full title. And I did that throughout my career. Because you always get their full name when you're booking them. You know, what's your full name? And you always get that middle name
as well,
So calling them by their full name when they've got a nickname, because most Neds, everybody calls them by their nickname. You know, I would never use that.
It's too pally.
And it moved on to the likes of The Great Train Robbery when that film came out. I've never seen it. I don't watch any of these things. The Wee Man, the Paul Ferris.
No,
I don't watch any of that stuff. Because it's kind of glorifying, isn't it?
It's really.
And the train robbery, the driver was killed, you know, his family.
He was badly injured, was he?
Yeah, I think he died of his injuries eventually. I think that's the case. But anyway, it just leaves a bad taste for me to glorify any of that stuff. Yeah. And I wouldn't let lawyers write books either, because they fall in. So that was the first 2 books were on black and white.
Yes.
Am I right in saying that the following ones have been on Ringwood?
Ringwood
Publishing. How did that come about, Alan, the change of publishing?
It turned out that black and white, I think, had changed direction. And basically I was in touch with black and white saying, Sheila Garvey's a good one. So I wrote Sheila Garvey before Liberation.
Oh, right.
And it's just the way it worked out.
Okay.
And the guy who runs Black and White said to me, well, we'll give it some thought, etc. And then nothing happened.
Did you have the book?
No, I didn't have the full manuscript. But
just the idea,
an outline basically, and I scribbled something down. So when, you know, obviously when you're looking for a publisher, you just contact various people, and Ringwood.
That's not that obvious to a lot of people. So tell us the process of finding a publisher then, Alan.
Well, a lot of people...
Because a lot of people out there have got stories.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them have written them down, but they've never got to the next stage.
Yeah. Well, if you've planning and doing it properly, you've got to either get an agent or obviously a publisher who's going to do that.
Okay.
But ultimately, you have real difficulty getting books published, especially if they're from Glasgow or Scotland or whatever, because
it's a niche market, right?
it is, and it's down in London. They've got lots and lots of publishers, but Sandy Jimison, who's running Ringwood, obviously, he's obviously seen the gap in the market and decided that there is a future for people who want to sit down and spend their time writing, particularly, for me anyway, crime books. And I think Sandy's hit upon something here because, you've obviously written your own book, and Sandy's he's seen that as something that's a niche of some sort.
Yeah. The ethos of Ringwood, when I was introduced to them, I think it's going to change in the near future, that we're going to have to broaden. We're hoping to, Ringwood are hoping to bring more diversity in to our publishing output every year, because it tends to be guys like us, who Ringwood appeal to. Scottish, the ethos was always first-time writers, Scottish, and the topics were kind of covered by politics, football, crime, those kind of pursuits, if you like. But the idea is over the next year or so to open that out into a much more diverse, because Scotland is much more diverse now than it's ever been, thankfully. So we've got authors like Leela Soma and people like that who are going to help us get into different marketplaces for young authors, because it's getting harder. Conversely, as we try to open up, it's getting harder to get published, because the publishers go where the money is. It's a money game, it's a business for them. And if they can get a signed author who's guaranteed 100,000 copies or whatever, then that's where they're going to go.
Of course it is. Of course it is. In fact, one of the girls that works for Black and White said to me once, publishers are like sheep. They want the hit book, for instance, like The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher. They just want to do that again, and they want you to do something like that. And it's not the way it works.
You saw it with that. What was that kind of porn thing that came out? The 50 Shades.
Oh, 50 Shades of Grey, yes.
And there's been so many imitations of that over the last 2 or 3 years. You see them, and it was a girl in Asda that told me it was in the aisle in a big basket. And I said to her, "Do you sell many of them?" She said, "Anything that goes in the big basket in the aisle flies." People assume that because it's there, it must be good.
It's
maybe there's a wee for sale sign on it or something. I don't know if it's buy one, get one free or whatever. But it's all to do with marketing at that point.
I suppose it is.
And that's what the publishers are about. If you've got a name that's been a footballer or been then you're going to sell books.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whether they're good or not. Whereas the Ringwood philosophy is to give people who have written something of merit in the literary world, then something, a vehicle. Thank goodness. You and I.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, there's definitely a market for it, I think.
So your process was to put it out. There's a wee point in here from the publisher side that I'd like to get across. When you put it out, how many publishers did you contact? And what did you send them?
It depends who the publishers are. As I say, most of them are based in London, and they say send us, the first 10 pages or the first 500 words. So
they've all got their own submissions. Criteria for you.
Yes.
Okay.
And you just go through that, and then more often than not, you'll get something back saying, send us the rest of it, or whatever.
Or don't. Did they ever come back to you and say, no, don't bother?
Oh, yeah. What they do is they say, this doesn't fit in with our niche, but you wonder.
They don't just say bugger off.
But that's the way you feel.
Of course.
When they reject something.
Yeah,
you think,
but you're a married man, aren't you? So you know about rejection, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. That's part and parcel.
So this submissions process is what I wanted to get to. Is at Ringwood, there's a submission process that goes on behind the scenes. And you submit your manuscript, maybe the full thing or part of it. and it goes through the girls, and they like it. If they like it, it goes to the board, and if the board like it, there's 5 other interns do a report on it, and this whole process can take 2, 3, 5, 6 months.
Oh yeah.
Depending on the time of year and the volume of submissions that are coming in. So during that period, the author himself or herself might have put out other submissions and got it back and been accepted. And this whole process at Ringwood is still going on. You get to the end of it and say, right, let's do this book. And someone phones you and says, we'd love to do your book. Well, I've had a publisher for the last 2 months.
Yeah, that can happen as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's part of the problem, is keep in touch with authors so that they all know what the process is. And it's not. When I wrote mine and Sandy said we're going to publish it, I thought it would be in the shelves the next week. Would you have a wee bit of that when you first started, when you did the manual book?
Well, I suppose I wasn't really sure of exactly what they were looking for, and I had to sort of top and tail it, as it were. I had to really go back over it a couple of times. But I should say that certainly Ringwood are right onto it. They were the sort of interns who edit it, and they do a really good job. But I wasn't sure whether the book would take, a year, 6 months, or whatever. But because of the timescale involved, when I spoke to Campbell Brown, who was the head of Black and White, he'd said to me, "Well, listen, if this is the year that's the 50th anniversary of Manuel's execution, then we'll get it out as soon as we can this year."
Yes, so they had a deadline to work towards. Yes. And you'd already written it?
It was just about ready to go, yes.
Okay. And then that editing process starts, which is what I wasn't ready for. I had no idea it was going to be as thorough as it was, and time consuming for it. And then the cover's got to get done, and all those bits have got to tie together. But you're an old hand at this now.
Well, I'm certainly feeling older.
That's a bad word, that choose. So, Sheila Garvey, Black and White didn't fancy it. They'd moved in a different direction, which is a nice thing to say. And Sandy fancied it.
Yeah.
Did they come back to you? Did Ringwood come back to you and say, we like the look of this?
Ringwood came back to me about Liberation. And I hadn't really tried anybody with the Liberation. It was just one of these ones.
So Sheila, in your mind, Sheila Garvey was going to be the first one, and then Liberation?
And then Liberation.
Right.
And the way it worked out was, when Sandy got in touch and said, "Listen, we quite like Liberation," I thought, maybe they didn't get my manuscript about Sheila Garvey. And then once Liberation was published, he said to me, "I've not forgotten about Sheila Garvey, so let's do that next."
Right.
So that worked out quite well as well, because it didn't really bother me. It was just the way they had been written. When I was leaving Crown Office eventually, I started to take a real interest in Sheila Garvey. So I did that first.
Right.
And it was only when I was reading Get Me Dowdle that I realised Liberation was a really good story. Right. Trying to explain why somebody could have saved their life in the witness box, but didn't.
Yeah.
But didn't. And that was always put down to the fact that he didn't want his wife and family to have the public shame of him having an affair. And I thought, there's got to be more to it.
Yeah.
I wonder why he really did that. And then I took the view that he in fact wanted to die himself.
Yeah.
He wanted to be hanged.
Yeah. He couldn't live with it.
I don't think he could.
No, because of what had gone. The shame. It's not as if the girl herself was any, I need to get the words right here, she wasn't from the same part of society as him.
No.
She would be a disgrace in company that he would keep at that time, with his colleagues, with his bosses, with his church, because he was a big...
He was Plymouth Brethren.
Yes.
So he was really, really strict.
Yeah, and with his own family, because he obviously had standards that he kept at home.
Yeah.
This was the total flip side of that, wasn't it? It was a real dirty secret that he was...
Oh, undoubtedly. I'm sure his colleagues all knew about it. But, he stepped over the line the second he had an affair with her. And then, of course, he had to steal a car.
Do you think he was very naive?
I think he was.
And I think it's fair to say the woman that he murdered eventually, and she was with a friend, I think, when he met her. It was a call to the house, a noisy party or something.
That's right.
And there was two other guys in the house. Two Neds, as I would call them.
Yeah.
Going non-politically correct there. But it was two guys who weren't the nicest guys in the world. They were there for a good time. And they used him to get rid of these guys when he came to the house.
That's right.
And then he got roped in with one of them.
He did, because I think she thought he was regarded as quite a handsome sort of guy, and he was well built. And in Liberation, I always say he looked like Clark Gable.
Right.
And I think there was some comparison with Clark Gable when he was charged with this. And the idea was that it was fascinating for so many people that somebody could be like him and still do the things he did.
Yes.
Because of his background, his marriage, all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, I think it was...
Even stealing the car and all that.
The car,
totally.
It just went right off the rails, basically. Yeah. And when he stole a car, he also stole what we call V5s now. So
he stole the documentation
for the car? He stole the documentation, and he was convicted of that as well. Not that it made any difference, because obviously in those days it was an execution for murder.
Yeah. But you never forget the golden rule. Throw enough and something will stick.
Yeah. Well, I think that it may have done, because that was the approach that the Crown were able to take, because they said, this guy has completely gone off the rails.
Yes, and this demonstrates it.
It demonstrated it.
It's a series of events.
He was stealing things as well.
Yeah.
But of course, what the big mistake that Robertson made was he insulted the jury's intelligence by going in and
denying the affair.
The affair, yes.
And was the affair well documented? Was it well evidenced in the case? There was no doubt that he was seeing this woman.
There was no doubt. We had neighbours, we had colleagues. And in 1950, in the Gorbals, just at Oxford Street, in fact,
community.
Just mentioned that everybody knew.
Yes.
And the phrase then was, I'm going to see a blonde, which was an idea about a beer an hour.
Yes.
And whether you're seeing a woman or not, it was just the phrase that was used. In his case, it was accurate.
Yeah. Thankfully, the police had moved on by the time that joined.
Yes.
In the 70s. So, great book, fantastic book. And it was written, it was meant to come out after Sheila Garvey. Sheila was already written by then. I don't suppose the order of them's that important, other than for you. I'm wondering why Sandy was taken to it. And I think it's maybe because of the women's issues that are raised in it. Whether intentionally or not, Alan. Because it's interesting you say your focus was really this strange decision made by a police officer to commit suicide, basically, and go to the gallows, rather than simply tell the truth and face up to it. But I think from Sandy's point of view, and certainly since the book came out, there's been lots of discussion in Ringwood and on other forums about the women's issues because of what's going on in the country at this very time. With women being murdered on the streets, within yards of their house, etc., etc. Another one last week. And these issues are very much and should be at the forefront of everybody's mind, and how we can change certain mindsets.
Well, it was funny how it worked out, because Sarah Everard was murdered just as Liberation was published.
Right.
And of course, that was a Metropolitan police officer who committed that. And I think that certainly James Ronald Robertson was the only police officer, I think, in the UK who was hanged as a result of activities that happened whilst he was serving as a police officer.
Right.
It wasn't as if he was off duty or something. He actually had that night taken a stolen car and run
no spoilers here. because that whole story is fascinating with the body being found and all the rest of it in a very public place. But he was on duty that night. He had committed this. Right?
That's right, yes.
And the whole affair had been probably taking place on duty.
Yes.
That was his beat, if you like.
That was it. That was it, yes. The rest of the time, he appears to have been quite a devout individual.
Yeah.
Who was quite strict with his kids.
Yeah.
And, generally was one of the people that everyone thought they could totally trust.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting for any cops or ex-cops as well, because everybody knows that's been in the post for 10 minutes that these temptations, these traps are set for you all the time.
Oh, yeah.
The same on the other side of the fence, I dare say, as well. But people like to influence people in uniform and people in positions as they see it of influence. And it goes on all the time.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So, up to date now then, and is the book successful? Is it still doing well?
I think it is, yes.
Liberation?
It is. Liberation, yes.
Got that signed copy here, yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it is doing quite well. But I think maybe Sheila Garvey would probably do a wee bit better, because certainly in the northeast of Scotland, I think there's more interest.
And that's where this happened, Stonehaven?
Yes, it was just south of Stonehaven itself. Yes.
So, tell us the background without spoilers, because we need to read something. We need to leave something for the readers.
Yeah.
Tell us the general background to it then. It's obviously a historic case. 68, you said?
1968, yes, that's when the trial was, and that's when the murder was.
Right.
And my interest in the Sheila Garvey case was trying to work out the Crown case, because having been a prosecutor myself, what you do after you get some experience is decide how you're going to approach this. What's the most effective way of approaching this?
Okay.
And
this is for trial you're talking about?
For the trial.
Right.
How do you prove this case? And of course, you've got all these
people. So you're saying that fiscals and Crown prosecutors actually give some thought to the trial?
Oh, you must do.
Yeah.
You must do.
That's news to me as a police officer. You thought you made it up as you went along.
Yeah, well, maybe some do. I think the better prosecutors certainly sit down and plan ahead.
A strategy.
And they've got a strategy. And as far as that case was concerned, I was quite amazed to see that the Solicitor General who prosecuted the case finished off with the nude photographs of Sheila Garvey.
Okay.
Now, these were photographs that her husband had taken, and then after he was murdered, she gave them to her lover, who was her co-accused.
Right.
And I thought, well, why would you finish at that point?
Yeah.
And that must have meant something in 1968 that you're going to shock the jury, perhaps, in 1968. Nowadays, the jury wouldn't be that shocked.
No,
they wouldn't. Their life has changed so much. But he finished off, and he always finished off.
We're talking about a time when miniskirts were just being, it was really shocking to some people in society to see above the ankle, never mind above the knee.
Yeah.
So it must have been shock value for the jury.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That must have been what was going through his mind. But, and
obviously the press would pick up on that immediately.
Oh, they would love it.
So you've guaranteed yourself worldwide headlines, really, haven't you?
Absolutely. If that is shocking at the time, and it was for certainly for Aberdeen, where a lot of people queued up from 5 in the morning to get into the trial. They could eat their sweeties and
it was a day out.
And it was before daytime television, I suppose.
They used to do that with hangings, of course. I'm not talking about Aberdeen, but they used to do that.
Yeah.
It was a day out for the family.
It was a big event.
Yeah.
It was a holiday.
So you're trying to figure out why the Crown set the strategy that it did. And you also look at it from Dowdall's point of view about the defence strategy. You're in an unusual position, I would suggest, that you can assess both of them with some credibility.
Well, I'd like to think so, after being, all my working life in court.
Half and half, defence.
And I think it does give you a perspective, because one of the great puzzles about Sheila Garvey was whether she was convicted, but whether she was actually part of a common plan to murder Max.
Okay.
her
The
husband. Because if you were going to do that, why do it in the master bedroom?
Of the marital home.
He's a man who spent his whole time drinking in Stonehaven and driving home. This was
Was
just
he a party boy, was he? Was
he
extrovert?
he was popping pills. He was drinking all the time.
Did he work?
Oh
Was he
yeah,
a professional?
yeah. He had a farm that was
Right.
making a lot of money,
Okay.
and he had a good staff who backed him completely.
Loaded?
Oh, I had tons of money, tons of money, and she married into the money
Right.
from a poor background.
Right.
So I don't think she had any say in what went on in the house. He would just tell her, "This is what's happening." And had he not been murdered, now that's quite a big phrase, that.
Yeah.
Had he not been murdered, he was facing a trial in Aberdeen Sheriff Court, or was it Stonehaven? It would have been Stonehaven, about reckless flying.
Right.
Because
He's a pilot.
he would get really drunk. Yeah, he had his own private plane.
Drunk in charge of an
He'd
aeroplane.
drunk, and then he would strafe cars in the coast roads just to pass the time.
Just for fun.
Boredom, and that's the sort of guy he was.
Right.
So she married into that, and she had no say in how he behaved or whatever.
Yeah.
And
She'd just do what she's told. And
she did as she was told.
Children?
Yes, 3 children.
3.
3 children, and I think 2 are still alive, as far as I understand. And
What age were they when the murder took place then, Alan?
I think the oldest girl was about 11 or 12. There was another girl who must have been about 7 or 8, and there was a boy who was 5. And my understanding is that the younger 2 are still with
on
us.
the go.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And were they in the house when the murder took place? As far as
They
we
were
know?
next door.
In the bedroom next
They
door?
were in the bedroom next door. And that's what makes me think, if she had any say in this common plan, she would have said, "No, if we're going to get him murdered, we'll do it somewhere else."
Yeah.
And it's not only that, it's a gun. So the kids would surely wake up if there was a shot fired in the room next door, and yet they didn't.
Do we know he was killed in that room? We know that.
The forensics show that there's blood in the walls and
Right.
all this sort of stuff, and of course she got rid of the mattress. That's another story which I go into, and that she was given
Because the body was concealed and all that stuff as well, wasn't it? There was a whole aftermath of the murder itself to try and conceal it, and the body wasn't found for a long time.
It was 3 months before the body was found, and that was hidden by her lover.
Right.
So only he knew that there was a place
Specialist
in
knowledge.
Morrison Castle
Mm-hmm.
where there was a sort of culvert, and he played there as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and he knew about that. So she didn't know where the body was taken. I wondered if she actually had anything to do with prior knowledge about the murder taking
Right.
place, because they recruited a third person who had a car.
Right.
So it just shows you how, sort of what we'd say in the west of Scotland, hon-knitted the whole thing was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this guy had a car.
So he'll do.
He'll do.
He'll become art and part.
Yeah, and he was, but he got a not proven.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to spoil the rest of it, but
No.
he walked away.
But to me, knowing nothing about it, and I've not had a chance to read the book yet, it sounds as though the whole thing was made up on the spot. It sounds much more spontaneous
It
than
does.
what the trial seems to have indicated, that there was some premeditation to it.
Well,
It feels to me that something went wrong on the night and it's happened and been dealt with.
Well, what happened was Tierendale, the lover,
However,
he was arrested first, and he had one version of events
right?
in that he said that Sheila Garvey had committed the murder. She was very loyal to Tierendale, and she didn't disabuse the police of that notion.
Right.
But they had stuck with it. They thought that she had murdered him
Mm-hmm.
because of Max's sexual demands on her.
Okay. So she had the motive, if you like.
She had the motive in
Abuse
respect that
and
he
whatnot.
turned up with a shotgun. This is the deceased,
Right.
and he had said, I'm going to do certain things to you. And apparently there was a struggle for the gun, and somehow he ended up being shot in the back of the head. And you think, wait a minute, that doesn't even sound right. Whereas the truth was that her lover, Brian Tierendale, had done everything he could to try and avoid being convicted of murder. So he actually blamed his co-accused,
Right.
both co-accused,
Right.
and separate.
Just try to deflect it.
He was doing his best, and his sister, Trudy, helped him to try and deflect it as
Who
well.
was his lawyer? Do you know who his solicitor was?
His lawyer was somebody from
Up in that area.
from Aberdeen,
Right.
as far as I could see. But his counsel was R. Taylor, who insisted being called doctor because he had a PhD in something.
Okay.
So, it was changed days.
Yeah, it was a different time, wasn't it? Of its time.
Murder trials in those days were gentlemanly affairs where you didn't rock the boat.
Right.
You just did your best for your client. And if the client was conventionally convicted and hanged,
Yes.
it made no great difference because you were just doing your job.
Unlucky old chap.
Yeah, that was it.
Yes.
Yeah, so the jury
What were they
decided.
tomorrow?
Yeah, that's
Fancy
was,
game of golf?
certainly that goes back to liberation because it was Jock Cameron, who was a judge, a very, very hard-line judge. He defended Robertson in the trial,
Right.
and at the end of it, so what? He's going to get hanged.
Yeah.
He just went away. He went back to his civil practice to make money because he never got paid for appearing for somebody
Robertson.
in 1950.
Right.
You think about it, it's just ridiculous.
Wow.
You just didn't get paid.
No. Different culture entirely. And it's the same with every aspect of society, isn't it?
Yeah.
Politics was different then. You had to
Oh,
have
yeah.
money to be a politician, and
yeah.
it was a different world entirely.
Uh-huh.
So, Sheila Garvey's still alive.
No, she died in 2014.
Okay.
Since the book's been written, there's been a journalist called Ian Hay got in touch with Sandy, who passed on his email address, and Ian Hay actually interviewed Sheila Garvey
Right.
the second that she was allowed out on parole.
When she was released. What,
She
she
was
do
released.
10 years or something?
She only did 10 years. Nowadays you get a minimum of, say, 20 or whatever.
Yeah.
But he interviewed Sheila Garvey and her new husband, whose name is McClellan, in
She got
Aberdeen.
married while she was in prison.
No, she came out of prison and then she got married.
Right.
And I think Ian Hay says it was in Aberdeen that she was based at the time. But he actually spoke to her, and apparently, a few months later, she had made a mistake because she married somebody who was a good bit younger than her,
Right.
as was Tevendale.
Right.
And then 6 months after she got married, she had to get an interdict to stop the new husband threatening her.
Oh, dear.
So she never really learned from the first
No,
one.
history repeats itself.
Aye,
I've
aye.
seen that so many times as a police
yeah.
officer. Women who manage to extract themselves from the most abusive circumstances
right.
with all the helps of authorities and whatnot,
Uh,
and then a few months later you learn they've
They're
taken
back
up
in.
with someone else
uh,
who's just as bad.
Uh-huh.
Tragic. So, the point I asked about Sheila there, what about Tevendale? Is he still on the go?
No, he died. He died before she did.
So there's nobody we can go and interview here.
I'm afraid there's none. There's none because even the third accused who got the not proven, he died shortly after that as well. In fact, all the main characters
They're gone,
have now gone.
right? Other than the two children, who were too young anyway.
The two kids, they.
Were they used as witnesses?
No, that was a point. The book launch that one of my ex-colleagues had made the point with the kids' witnesses, because they would have been competent witnesses.
Mm-hmm. Certainly a 12-year-old.
The 12-year-old would have been. But she had I think she had a bit of a breakdown after all this when she had lost both parents.
Yeah.
So I don't think she was even asked. I think maybe the gentlemanly approach
Again,
to things.
of its day.
Of its
yes.
day, possibly. And they could prove it because Sheila Garvey's mother can't.
Right.
And it also begs the question, what murderer is going to tell their mum,
Yeah,
that he's not coming back? You know? And I mean, that's really odd.
Yeah.
And yet she did. And then the mother is the one, after 3 months, she couldn't take it anymore. And she went into the Lawrencekirk police office.
Right.
And said,
And that's what triggered the whole inquiry.
That's right, yes.
So the $10 million question, I suppose, is, do you come to any conclusions in these stories with Manuel and with Liberation about Robertson? Do you come to conclusions at the end Your thoughts on the case, to summarise what went wrong, what was Dowdall's strategy, what was motivating the different players? Or do you leave it nice and open for the reader to make their own?
Well, certainly with Manuel, I tried to work out, he was such a strange creature that nobody in the west of Scotland had ever met anybody like Peter Manuel.
No.
He was, the original title of the book was Scotland's First Serial Killer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he may have been, because we hadn't even invented the phrase serial killer at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And with Sheila Garvey, certainly, I was really intrigued as to how the Crown could prove their case. And I did come to conclusions about the evidence that was presented to the court. And I'm interested in any feedback, because people might agree with me or might disagree with me that maybe her trial wasn't as fair as it could have been.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Question mark.
Yeah.
Talking about feedback from the book then, we've had a very successful launch in Glasgow, a great night, and I know that the book's selling well. Any word on the roadshow that we were talking about?
Well, Sandy certainly mentioned it, and he's got Raquel interested, I think.
That was your intern that was working with you on the book?
She I think, might be part of it. I'm not sure, but there is another intern who's based in Aberdeen,
right? And
he's going to try and get her to set
something up,
so that if anyone's interested in having a chat about it.
Yeah.
I think people in Aberdeen will remember this case much better than people in, say, Edinburgh will.
Yeah,
because
the local connection.
It was such an amazing event.
And particularly in Stonehaven.
Oh, in Stonehaven, of course, they will remember it.
And I don't need any excuse for a night out in Stoney, that's for sure.
No, that's a good idea, actually.
Whether we sell any books or not, I'll speak to anybody. That's sorted.
Yeah.
So, what's in the pipeline then, Alan?
After this.
Have you got some other project in mind? Can you do me a favour with the next one? Going to pick a case where some of the witnesses are still alive, so that we could, you and I could go and interview them.
I'm not sure about that, because the only one that's piqued my interest recently is also from 1950.
Okay.
So I don't think there's anybody left.
What was it? What was it, 1950?
It was a case.
This is a sneak preview.
In which two brothers were convicted, and they were both due to hang.
Right.
And only one did hang.
Right. That's intriguing.
It's a really interesting case. So I'm working on that.
In Scotland?
Now. Yes, it was in Govan.
Right.
Yeah, it was a case from Govan.
All the best cases were in Govan anyway.
Yeah, there's some juicy ones from Govan, there's no doubt.
Yeah. So there'll be nobody alive from that, obviously. It's 70 odd years ago.
No, there's nobody left in that one, I'm pretty sure.
Are you deliberately avoiding ones that get him to contradict you? Is that what it is?
Well, maybe that's a good policy. Yes. That's definitely a good policy.
Phone you up and say, that's a lot of rubbish.
Yeah. Actually, that happened there was a programme called In Plain Sight that was a three-parter, and it was about Peter Manuel.
Right.
And the people who got involved in that, they said to me that some of the people who were related to one of Manuel's victims had complained about it,
right,
because they said it just brought back all these terrible memories. It turned out they were only toddlers at the time.
Yeah.
And I think the company involved took the view that there's probably no point in even speaking to them about it, because it was going ahead anyway.
Yeah.
And everybody knew the story about Peter Manuel.
It's not as if it's been hidden anywhere. No. It's Scottish folklore now.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Grown arms and legs as well, no doubt. But as you say, he was a fascinating character, and his trial itself was fascinating, the way he conducted himself in that.
That's right. He defended himself after the legal submission failed, which it was bound to do.
Yeah.
But after that, he sacked his counsel, and he adopted what he thought was the advocate's pose, hand on hip.
Yes.
I mean, that's just it's ridiculous.
That's the Donald Finlay pose. Right.
He doesn't smoke in court, that's for sure.
Brilliant. So we'll wait and see what the next project is, but hopefully we can get more insight into Sheila Garvey up in the northeast.
Yes, that'd be great.
People up there might bring things to the table that you haven't been aware of as yet, the local perspective at the time.
That happens all the time with Peter Manuel.
Yes.
I get people getting in touch with Peter Manuel to tell me things I didn't really know much about.
Yeah.
And when one of my sons got married a few years ago, one of the women from the opposition, as it were, she approached me when we were sitting drinking or something, and she said, you know, my old uncle up in Peterhead, he was a prison guard, and he spent Manuel's last night with him, playing cards and talking about football, but you don't talk about the future, you just talk about games in the past.
Yeah.
And I said I'd love to meet this chap. And of course, I did nothing about it, and he passed away. He was in his 90s.
Right.
But he had actually spent some time as the death squad.
Last few hours.
The death watch squad with Peter Manuel.
Yeah.
You know, so as I say, that's one that keeps coming back. It keeps coming back.
Yeah. And these will be the same. Will be the same when we go up to the northeast.
I think so, yes.
I'm saying I've roped myself into this quite nicely.
Well
I've invited myself along.
You have. It's just an art.
It's taken a long time to perfect. Alan, thanks for coming along.
Thanks very much for asking me, Simon. It's been a pleasure.